And now it is my great honor and privilege to introduce our speaker for today. This is a guy I get to work with every single day.
Oh, boy.
And you know what? It is an experience that you all are incredibly jealous of, because I get to hear the stories. I get to hear the facts. When somebody buys a brick in our memorial walkway, I'll show it to Wayne. He'll be able to tell me exactly what we need to know about the troop that person came from, where they served. Hey, did you know that they were such and such? You know, he is a font of information, and I get to share that with him every day. And as somebody who is not a historian but a Civil War enthusiast, it's a great experience for me. So, licensed battlefield guide, historian, author, CEO of the museum, I present to you Wayne E. Motts.
Thank you, everyone. And don't ask me to start a computer. That's the first thing. And now they're going to think that we coordinated this, because wait till you see my dedication for today's talk, Mary Beth. Everybody knows it's my custom to always dedicate the talks when I give them, so I'll be doing that here today. I can't thank you enough for coming out. You honor me, you honor the museum, and I hope to be able to give you a nice program today, despite the technical difficulty I had running around here in just a few moments ago. It's an unusual story about about a character at Gettysburg, and I hope you all enjoy it. I have been at the museum 8 years in April. It is very difficult to believe that. It was the greatest day of my professional career. I tell everybody the happiest title I have is Pappy, because I'm a grandfather, but the best professional title I have is the CEO of this museum. And the happiest day of my professional career was the day I was honored to come up here and be with the folks that are here. We have a very small staff here, 7 full-time employees that help manage this 65,000 square foot museum. And you're only as good as the people that work with you, everybody. And I work with a wonderful team. There's so much dedication among the troops that are here. So I'm dedicating my program today to the staff of the National Civil War Museum. And when the Prince of Darkness comes and visits, he comes to the National Civil War Museum. This is the staff and Ozzy Osbourne on his tour at the National Civil War Museum on the day of his birthday. His birthday was December 3rd, and that's the day he toured the National Civil War Museum. So this is most of the staff, but this is before Mary Beth came to join us, so we got to get her in. And can you imagine? She's not shy. Look how she's standing behind one of the other staff members. So these are the folks that I work with up here at the National Civil War Museum, and they just mean so much to me. This place means so much to me, and I just want to thank them for everything they do here. Okay, Wayne, what is the story about today? This story is an interesting story. It's a story, in a nutshell, about a man who was born in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. He lived in Gettysburg until he was 14 years old. And then at age 14, his family moved to central and eastern Kentucky. And when the Civil War broke out in 1861, he joined the U.S. Regular Army and then came back to the town he was born in to fight at the Battle of Gettysburg. Native of Gettysburg, came back not as a volunteer soldier, but as a soldier in the United States Regular Army. And the story is about him and his family. And there is a lot to tell related to this story. And this is the first time I've given this tour or this talk anywhere in this part of Pennsylvania, anywhere. I've given it one other time, and that's in Kentucky. So what's interesting about this story is it's been known for quite some time, but I'm really the first person that went to Kentucky to do research. I actually hired a researcher to help me out to research things in Kentucky and here in Pennsylvania. So you're going to get both sides of the story today, along with a lot of intrigue for his family. And guess what? You don't have to remember anything, because I have the whole timeline on this sheet of paper for you right here. So when you leave here today, all you got to do is take one of these. I'll hand them out. I'm not going to give them to you now because you're going to look at it. I don't want that. So I'm going to give them to you, and you can go out, and everything is written on the front and back there. So the timelines and the things I'm going to be talking about, it's all going to be written down for you. This story starts because in 2015, this man's great-grandfather came to the National Park Service Visitor Center front desk and handed the front desk crew a picture of their relative on the Civil War battlefield. And in 2015, John Heiser, National Park Service historian, wrote a blog for the Gettysburg National Military Park using that photograph about this story. In 1893, this soldier wrote and was quoted an account of his in the dedication of the Pennsylvania Memorials, and it also appears in a book that came out in 1990 about the U.S. regular troops at Gettysburg. So this story has been known, but the depth of it in some of the things I'm going to be telling you have not been discovered or known until now, and much of this is really some unpublished information. Let's start with the person's name. One of the battlefield guides in this room said to me, and at least 8 of my colleagues, battlefield guides of the National Park Service at Gettysburg, are here with us today in this room, and I thank you so much. I'm so proud to be part of that group. Somebody asked me, Wayne, how do you say the man's name? So, this is a newspaper article. I tried to blow it up for you folks in the back. You don't have to worry about this because I'm going to tell you. This is a newspaper article from his brother in Kentucky in 1897. And it says that this man changed his name to the name of Stouch, S-T-O-U-C-H. And the family's name is Stouch, S-T-O-U-G-H. So the man we're going to talk about today goes by Stouch. His father went by the name of Stout, and his brother and family went by that name. So you'll hear me refer to him as George Stouch. You will hear me refer to his family as the Stouts, because that's their name. And this is a newspaper article from 1897 that talks about this. This story begins in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and it begins on March 3rd, 1842, which is the birth of George Stouch. His father was a blacksmith by the name of Leonard Stow, and he had a shop in Gettysburg probably beginning in about 1843. Now remember, all the paperwork said the person we're talking about today, George Stouch, was born in Gettysburg, and he was born in 1842. The first advertisements in the newspaper come out in 1843, and this is an advertisement. You don't need to worry about reading it. It just says that he is blacksmithing, and he is at an old stand at the east end of town. And this dates to the Gettysburg Compiler from 1846. It's really been great for historians like myself to look at digitized newspapers. When you have digitized newspapers, boy, what a great amount of resources that you have. So this man is in Gettysburg in 1843. He is a blacksmith in the 1840s, and he has his family with him, including George Stouch, who's born in 1842. And he turns his business from a blacksmithing business into a coach-making business. So here's an advertisement in the newspaper for coach-making in January of 1848. So between 1843, roughly, and 1848, sometime in those 5 years, we don't know exactly where, he went from being a master blacksmith to making carriages in town. You probably know that in this period of time, carriage making was a huge business in Gettysburg, right up to the time of the American Civil War. Where does the story of our talk today, George Stouch and his father, Leonard Stow, where are they at in Gettysburg? Well, we can find that out. Here's a Google Earth image. I made it so big, all you folks in the back should be able to see it. Dave Demi of the SUV. Can you see that A back there? Yes, you can, of course. That's the Gettysburg Hotel. Everybody recognize it? That is St. James Lutheran Church. You all with me? This is York Street. Here's the square. And the Stows, you're preempting it over here, Bob. The Stows are at letter C, where the Hanover Road and the York Road, US Route 30, and Liberty Street cross right there. Okay? And obviously some of you know what's there today. We're going to talk about that. Here is an 1850 map that says L. Stouch. So there they're pronouncing it Stout. And this is the carriage stop in 1850 on the map of Gettysburg here. So this family is in Gettysburg doing business. And we actually have photographs of what this carriage shop looked like during the Battle of Gettysburg. Now, this family is not here during the Battle of Gettysburg. We're going to talk about that because they end up leaving. But here's a photo you've all seen in Bill Fresnito's book or in the Library of Congress. This is Cemetery Hill looking over what is now Gettysburg school system buildings that are here. The middle school, elementary school building, that's here. Right there, St. James Lutheran Church in the background. There's the Colt Farm, right off to the right of that image. And if you take this image and you go to librarycongress.gov and you download it and you expand it, I have to watch using words blow up. I tend to use that a lot, but so I gotta be careful where Homeland Security caught me away, right? Be careful mentioning that. If you enlarge this photograph, in the background of it, right in there, is the Stout family property. And we have descriptions of it because Mr. Stout actually goes bankrupt. Bad for him, very good for us, ladies and gentlemen, because we get descriptions of what the property actually looks like. You enlarge that photograph from the detail, and right there is the two-story coach-making shop of Leonard Stout, and that is the home of George Stouch, our native of Gettysburg, born in 1842. This is where he's living, which is at the corner of York Street and Liberty Street today. And right here is one of the outbuildings, and the two-story brick house is right there. Now, I was at the Adams County Historical Society not long ago. You know, I know everyone there. And they actually showed me a photograph they just found in the collection. Now, when you've got hundreds of thousands of photographs at the Adams County Historical Society and you're going through them, a lot of times you don't know what photographs you actually have. And when they were going through the photographs in that collection, photographs taken in the turn of the century, they found a frontal photograph of where this family lived in the 1850s at Gettysburg. And it's right here. This is an unpublished photograph of the house. And this was taken at the turn of the century, about 1905 to 1909. And right there is the Stout or Stout family home. Leonard Stout, his family. The 1850 census shows him with 5 children. And he had more than 5 children because he had children that actually died. George, the subject of our talk today, who fights at Gettysburg, is only one of the children inside this home. But this is an original photograph that's been unpublished. And of course, some of my folks up front already know where, Wayne, what is at this place today? And of course, it's the Chinese restaurant, Lee's Buffet at Gettysburg. 165 York Street is the address here. It appears that Leonard Stout is doing very well in business, and it is a very respected member of the community, a member of the Methodist Church at this time, which is where the GAR Hall is, downtown Gettysburg today. From the time that he is there, it looks like his native home is probably York, Pennsylvania, but he and his family living in this property, making carriages, have a very successful business there until the 1850s. And so for about 10 years or longer, this place is very successful. And then everything goes south. And it goes south because Leonard Stout, the father of George, we're going to talk about today, has a drinking problem. And what starts that drinking problem, or why? It doesn't appear that for the first 9 years that he's in Gettysburg, he has this problem. Later on, it appears that he has a drinking problem. And so the question becomes, why does he have this drinking problem? And he lost a son that was 10 months old in 1851. He lost a daughter of disease at age 3 in 1852. And his father dies in Gettysburg, in that house, in 1853 at age 71. So in 3 years, he's going to lose 2 children, and he's going to lose the father, the grandfather of the subject that we're talking about today. And this, I think, creates a problem with Leonard. He may have had other problems, but he gets kicked out of the Methodist Church. He actually goes to the Lutheran Church. And by 1855, ladies and gentlemen, his business is up for sheriff sale. This is showing that there are carriage making at his place of business occupied by Jacob Troxel, and it says at the old stand of Leonard Stout. So by June 1855, he is not running this place. He still owns it, but he is not running it. In 1856, here's an October one, I should say. Let's start there. This is the sale of the property, and it describes the smokehouse, the wash house, the blacksmith shop, large 2-story building. That's what you just saw in the photographs, taken from 1863. all of this goes up for sheriff's sale on October 22nd, 1855, and it is sold November of 1855 for $1,000 to a man named Samuel Russell, who happens to have a business partner that all of you know, and his business partner in making carriages at Gettysburg is David Wills, who invited Abraham Lincoln, of course, and they actually rent this place out to multiple renters up to the time of the Civil War. In 1863, this place is being occupied by William T. King. King was a Gettysburg tailor, and the Adams County Historical Society actually has his tailor shop sign that had bullet holes in it from the time of the battle. So living in this home after Leonard Stout is multiple people, including William T. King, and multiple people are running a carriage business in this particular place. Now, not only is all the assets of Leonard Stout liquidated, he actually gets charged with a crime in 1856, and that crime is against this man. Did you all know John Burns was the constable of the town of Gettysburg? Before the American Civil War, John Burns is the guy out there handing you warrants for arrest. He's enforcing the law. Here he is in 1863 recovering from his wound at Gettysburg. In 1856, he has to serve papers on Leonard Stout, the owner of this carriage property. And in 1856, who's in the home? 14-year-old George, of course, along with his sisters and brothers. Apparently, Leonard becomes so incensed, he attacks John Burns, and here's actually out of the paper, quote, striking him and biting off part of his ear with an attempt to disfigure said informant. Did you know that John Burns only had part of his ear at the Battle of Gettysburg? Why? Because Leonard Stout bit it off. Now, what's even more fascinating about this story is the Adams County Historical Society actually has an account book for this carriage making business, because it was used in a court battle that did not include Leonard Stout. You'd think it would, but it didn't. This is the actual account book for Leonard Stout's carriage business, and it's at the Adams County Historical Society. And if you read it here, it says, witness Leonard Stout and his disposition before us on the 24th of June, 1856. So this family is in Gettysburg from 1842, the birth of George, all the way up to 1856. And from November of 1855 to June of 1856, for those 7 months, I don't know what Leonard Stout is doing. Nor do I know where he is living, because his building has been sold. So where this family is, did he send his family to Kentucky ahead of him? Maybe he did. I don't know. But the newspaper articles, and by George's own recollection, he says the family moved when he was 14 years old, when he went in 1856. And they go to Richmond, Kentucky. Now, you're going to say, Wayne, why did they go to Richmond, Kentucky? Wayne doesn't know why. Of all places in the whole world, why did they choose Richmond, Kentucky? Where is it? It is right in the center part of the state, about 35 miles southeast of Lexington, Kentucky. I have absolutely no idea why this family chose to go here. It's a smaller place than Gettysburg, and it is a much different environment than it would have been in Gettysburg. There must have been a connection for Leonard to go to this place. And right now, sitting here today, I can't tell you what it is. So young George, 14 years old, born and reared at Gettysburg, still in school, gets uprooted from Gettysburg and sent west to Richmond, Kentucky. In 1860, there were 845 persons living in Richmond. What's the population of Gettysburg? 2390. Gettysburg's a bigger place than this. But what's interesting about this is 45% of the population of Richmond, that town, which is the county seat of Madison County, Kentucky, 45% of its residents are slaves, are enslaved people. Much different from the environment, of course, that this family left coming to Gettysburg. And as you probably know, Kentucky is the most split state, basically, in the American Civil War. You hear about Missouri and Kentucky involved. I'm going to tell you, my mother is from the county right there. So I'm a half Kentuckian, and I can tell you that Kentucky is a place that is very split during the Civil War. You probably all know Mary Todd Lincoln had half-brothers fighting for the Confederacy. She had a brother-in-law, Confederate general, in the American Civil War. And in the 1860 presidential election, John Bell gets most of the votes. John Bell is the Union candidate, and he's going to carry Virginia, he's going to carry Kentucky, I think he gets Tennessee, he's got like 3 different places that he carries as the Union candidate. And what was shocking to me is Abraham Lincoln actually got 85 votes in Madison County. Madison County had 17,000 residents. Not all of them are voting, but I can't believe Lincoln even got 85. In many counties in Kentucky, he got 0. Okay. So it's interesting to see, and if you pull the census out and you look at it, most people that lived here at the time of the American Civil War were born in Kentucky. They didn't come from elsewhere that are here. But Leonard Stout is living down in Kentucky. He's moving his family out of Gettysburg. And you would hope, ladies and gentlemen, that he's going to try to get a new start after attacking John Burns in 1856. And so I went down to Richmond, Kentucky, and gave a talk down here. Here's Main Street at Richmond. There's the courthouse right there. And right down the street down here is where the Stouts will be living. And I'll show you exactly where that is. So this is just a small little tiny town. And you also should know there was a battle here in 1863 between Edmund Kirby Smith and William Bull Nelson. So there's a Civil War battle right outside here during the time of the American Civil War. That's here. Once the Stouts get down there, one of the first things that happens is George's mother dies. She dies in 1860, and she is only 40-some years old. I think she's 42 years old when she dies. But when you pull, they actually have records, a mortality schedule, which was done by the U.S. Census Bureau of people that died in the year previous to the census. So in 1860, they did a census that said if you died between 1859 and 1860, how did you die, where did you die, and who were you? So usually, you don't have death certificates in most places in 1860. This is the 1860 mortality schedule for Richmond, Kentucky. And what's shocking about this, because it kind of fits into the story we're going to talk about, is that Mrs. Stout, they have her at 41 there, I think she may be 42, married, birthplace, state of Maryland, cause of death, strangulation. Oh. And death, sudden. Now, I'm not sure, I don't know why, it's unfortunate, but I don't, this family has a lot of tragedy, a lot of problems. Now, what's Leonard Stout doing there, and what's George Stouch? What are they doing there? So here's the father. Here's Leonard. Here are the sisters of George and 2 of his brothers, listed as master blacksmith. He owns some property there, and he has an estate. Now, you will notice that George Stouch, the person we're talking about today, came back to Gettysburg, is not living in this house in 1860. He is living 1 block away. This is him in the 1860 census, and he's going by his middle name. Now, most of the papers that I found refer to him as George. He signed his name, George W.H. Stout. Wesley Hancock was his middle name. It appears that he's going by his middle name, Wesley. He is 18 in 1860, and he is a clerk at a drugstore, born in the state of Pennsylvania, and he is living 1 block away from his father and sisters at a hotel. This hotel has 32 people living in it. 24 of them are boarders. The rest belong to the family. And a portion of that hotel from 1860, it was built about 1812, is still standing in Richmond, Kentucky. And right there it is. This is the original portion of the hotel right there. They tore down the rest of it, and they made the Madison Family Court building to look like it. Notice that? People told me down there, the court people told me that this building went up, I don't know, maybe about 20 years ago, but they preserved a portion of the hotel that was run by John B. Francis. John B. Francis actually moved to Missouri later on and dies in St. Louis, Missouri. But he is operating a hotel, and our subject, George Stouch, the man we're talking about today, he's living in here in 1860. And notice it said, clerk at drugstore. So you think to yourself, how many druggists are in Richmond? There's only one. So unless he's working outside the town, he's working for Isaac Smith. Isaac Smith was a druggist born in the state of New Hampshire. working and living in Richmond, Kentucky. So he learned the drug trade. He's not following his father's trade. Notice that, as a blacksmith. And when he decides that he wants to join the regular army, he's going to be 19 years old, and he's going to go to Washington, D.C. to do it. He's not going to join the regular army here in Madison. Now, why does he decide to join the regular army, not volunteer troops? I don't know. I can't tell you. And this county was split. There was a cavalry regiment that rode with John Singleton Mosby, very famous Confederate cavalry leader in the Civil War, that came from this place. So you could be a Union or a Confederate soldier and come out of this town. Now remember his background. This is a Pennsylvania. As far as I know, he owns no slaves, nor does his father when they go from Pennsylvania to Kentucky. They're not listed as owners in the slave schedule. And Madison County is third in the state of Kentucky in 1860 for number of slaves. It's number 3. Very high slave population in this part of Kentucky. Kentucky, the county where my mother's from, 27 slaves. Second least of the whole state at the time of the Civil War. So if you're from eastern Kentucky, it's a lot different than if you're from western Kentucky. And George goes to Washington, D.C., and he enlists in the U.S. regular army. I don't know what motivates him to do that. I don't know if friends go. I'm not sure why he chooses that. And this is where they lived in the town. That's the original plot map right there. 20 is a place where they actually lived. And this is 248 to 246. Somewhere right in here is where the Stouts had Leonard Stout, where he actually lived. Remember, Wesley's living, George Wesley Hancock Stout's living up the street. So there's nothing there of the buildings where they had their carriage shop or anything like that that's there. But this is the spot on the property where his father lived, and he's about 1 block up the street. And here's the regular army enlistment. You don't have to read it, but just understand it. It says that he's born in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. So right away, the enlistment says he's born in Gettysburg, he's 19 years old, and it does list him as a druggist. Hazel eyes, dark hair, 5 feet 8 inches tall. And he is 19 years and 9 months, it says, on this write-up. And he enlists in B Company of the 1st Battalion of the 11th United States Infantry Regiment. So, the regular army at the eve of the Civil War had 10 regiments. The whole regular army, from Maine to California, is about 16,000 people. And the Civil War breaks out, you've got to expand the regular army. So Congress decides to expand the regular army, and they're going to add regiments 11 to regiments number 19. And when they do it, they will use a configuration like the military uses today. There will be battalions, and then the companies. The older units, they didn't have this. So the unit that George is joining is not an old unit that's been around for a long time. It is a new unit in the U.S. regular army, and he's assigned to Company B, the 1st Battalion of the 11th United States Infantry Regiment here. And it appears that he goes up very fast, from private to corporal to sergeant, and at the Battle of Gettysburg, he is the sergeant major of this regiment, which means that he must have been a very good soldier. The tax records indicate down in Kentucky that he was a member of the militia there. So he actually had militia training in Kentucky, and he proves to be very good at doing whatever he is doing. And he is sick a good portion of the time right at the beginning of his enlistment. This unit is outside Washington, D.C. Then it gets sent to the Virginia Peninsula. It's part of the 5th Union Army Corps on the peninsula. And he is at the siege of Yorktown, which is April through May of 1862 on the Peninsula Campaign. And George gets some sort of malarial fever. And he's in the hospital from April of 1862 until February of 1863. He's not with his regiment. He's sick all that time. Then when he reports back to the regiment, he'll be with it at Chancellorsville. And because of his actions at Chancellorsville, he's given the sergeant major seat of the regiment, which is important. And then he will be at Gettysburg where he's wounded. We're going to talk about that, of course. It's going to be a major part of what we're talking about. And then he gets commissioned. He will actually get a commission. During the Civil War, it's not uncommon for a soldier to join the regular army and be commissioned from the ranks. It almost never happens prior to the Civil War. There's a big class difference between the officers and the enlisted men. And the Civil War gave a big chance for people now to try to get some upward mobility. in doing this, and George Stouch happens to be one of these people. So it's apparent, you know, that he does pretty good. Let's talk a little bit about the Battle of Gettysburg. So, at the Battle of Gettysburg, let's remember that these troops are part of the 5th Union Army Corps. They're part of the Division of Roman Heirs, and there are 2 brigades of regular infantry soldiers. About 4,000 men from the U.S. regular army fight in the Battle of Gettysburg. That includes regular cavalry, includes regular artillery, it includes regular infantry. What's one of the biggest monuments on the battlefield? And no one hardly ever thinks about it. Monument to the United States regulars. It's put up there in 1909, huge memorial to the U.S. regular army troops that are there. So the regular army has a corps component. They're part of the 5th Corps. They march in from Union Mills down in Maryland, all the way up to the Hanover area, out to Hanover Road, and then into Gettysburg. And we're going to talk a little bit about it. One of the officers says on the eve of the Battle of Gettysburg, on June 30th, 1863, that he is asked by the colonel of his regiment to muster the troops for pay. Remember, June 30th is a payday. We all like that if we're battlefield guides at Gettysburg, because it means the next day we have an accounting of who's actually at the battle, right? Because everybody's got to go muster in. Well, it's interesting to tell you, and I'm sure this happened many times, but one of these officers said, the colonel rode up and said, hey, you've got to muster everybody in. This is down at Union Mills, Maryland. And the officer said, I don't have any books, I don't have any paper, I don't have any pens, I don't have anything. And the colonel says, look, you got to do the best you can. So he says he tore off a piece of newspaper, and in the white margin of the newspaper, took out like a pencil and wrote in the names of everybody that he thought were present for duty. He says the next day he used it to light his pipe. And he told the colonel of the regiment, this is how many men I have. And then he says all the muster rolls that were done in this unit were done after the Battle of Gettysburg. So these numbers that we think are good, guess what, everybody? They may not be so good. The 11th U.S. Infantry Regiment, which George Stouch is part of, has about 280 men in the Battle of Gettysburg, if the number's accurate. About 280 men. They're going to lose over 120 men, 46% of their command. Going to be about 40, 42 to 46%. You can work out the percentage. Big. This is a huge number. And where they're going to be fighting here? They're going to be fighting in the wheat field on July 2nd, 1863. So, my co-author and friend and author Sickles is here, so we got to put Sickles in here. There he is. So, here is General Sykes in the 5th Corps, and it shows them coming over here to Little Round Top for this assault on July 2nd, 1863. And the commanding officer of George Wesley Hancock Stouch's company, B Company, from the day that he enlisted to the day that he was promoted to be Sergeant Major. Now, when he's a Sergeant Major, he's not in a company. He's with the whole unit. But his company commander, all the way up to the Battle of Gettysburg, was this man right here, Thomas Berry. That carte de visite comes from the collection of the National Civil War Museum. It is hand-signed by Thomas Berry. And he is killed on July 2nd fighting the wheat field, shot in the stomach, and buried in the National Cemetery, right there. So it's just ironic we're telling this story today about a soldier that was with him for all this time, and here in the collection of the National Civil War Museum we have a photograph of this man here. This man's from Massachusetts, from the state of Massachusetts, but that's the company commander. On July 2nd, these units get to the battlefield about 3 a.m. in the morning, and they're on the Baltimore Pike, just south of Gettysburg, near what used to be the McDuffers Golf Course and Powers Hill. All of you know those places probably, right? And then they're going to get pulled from there and shipped over to where Little Round Top is located. That's what you saw on that first map. They'll be on the slopes of Little Round Top probably around 6:30 in the evening, later in the action. Remember, the fighting starts about 4 o'clock in the afternoon down at this end of the battlefield. And I got a map. I know it's hard for you all to see in the back, but this is Little Round Top right here. This is the wheat field right here. And the 11th U.S. is right here. So one of the brigades of the regulars will line up in a line of battle, and the other will be stacked in column. And unfortunately for the unit we're talking about today, they're right up front. That's why they're going to take 40-some% casualties here on July 2nd. And they're going to move into the wheat field and Devil's Den right here at the bottom. And my guess is, now the times vary on this. Some of the accounts say it's around 5:30. Some of them say it's later, around 6:30 in the evening, somewhere around here. We know this is toward the end of the action. They're going into the wheat field to relieve members of the 2nd Union Army Corps here, to have them pull out while they're going to fight the members of Benning's Georgia Brigade, the Texans that are in here, and also George Anderson's troops. And of course, coming down the wheat field at around 6 o'clock will be the troops that defeat all the Union forces in the Peach Orchard. William Wofford's brigade, one that comes down the road here and beats back all the troops that are here. So if you're in this U.S. Regular Command, if you're not killed or captured inside here, you got to retreat, ladies and gentlemen, and you got to retreat back toward Little Round Top. So the 11th U.S. is right here at the top of this ridge, just to the north of where Devil's Den is located today. The battlefield guides have a name for this place. We call it Regular Hill. That's what we call it today because the U.S. regular troops are here. This is the tablet to the 11th United States Infantry Regiment, sitting in front of Little Round Top. There's Little Round Top, New Jersey, and of course one of our buses driving on there. We've got to have that in here, right? Bus Scotty at Gettysburg. That's over here. So the 11th U.S. is the one that's going to go right here. And if you walk over here and look down into the Valley of the Death, you'll be right down along where Crawford Avenue is. Here's what that looks like, right here. There's Little Round Top, 91st Pennsylvania, the rear section here of Smith's Battery. And this rock is the one we want to focus on right here in the Valley of the Death. Because what's really great about this story is in 1886, George Stout comes back to Gettysburg. Now this is 23 years after fighting here. And he has his photograph taken at the rock where he is on July 2nd, 1863. This is the photograph that was handed to John Heiser, the historian, at Gettysburg National Military Park in June of 2015, and why he wrote a blog story about it. So here we are 5 years later, and we can do some interesting research. Now, I just called the man that donated that piece to the museum, and he lives in Colorado, and we're going to have some conversations. And he is the great-grandfather of George Stouch. And so we're going to talk some more about this. But this is how stuff happens. People bring things in, and we get stuff. So there is a photograph of George Stouch right here, 23 years after the Battle of Gettysburg. And right there it is. There he is, right here. This is him. Here's the rock. See the lines on the rock down there? There it is right there. Same rock where he is. You go down Gettysburg, then and now. You go down there. So, he is retreating off of that hill on the afternoon of July 2nd, 1863, while the Confederates are overwhelming that position. And he gets down here to where this rock is. And then he gives us what happens. Now, he has a couple different accounts of this. And I'm going to give you one of them. I was a sergeant major of the 11th Infantry at Gettysburg and was captured about 5 p.m. on July 2nd by Cobb's Legion of Wofford's Brigade. I find that hard to believe because they're on the other side over here, but I wasn't there. That's what he says. From this position on the crest near the wheat field and in the woods between the wheat field and Devil's Den in front of Little Round Top, I was captured while helping to carry to the rear Lieutenant Petrie of our regiment, who was wounded in the retreat, and we were caught at a rock and ordered by the rebels to get behind it to protect ourselves from the fire of our own men at Little Round Top and those who had reformed at the foot to resist the charge of the rebels. With me behind the rock were Lieutenant Matthew Elder, Lieutenant Petrie, Sergeant Price, Private Smith, and Cook, all of the 11th Infantry Regiment. Boy, they're crowded in on that rock, aren't they? Now, you got a problem. You're on this side of the rock, the Union Army's shooting at you. You're on this side of the rock, the Confederate Army is shooting you. Up here, Devil's Den. So just trying to get protection here is going to be a huge deal for him. And he says that the Confederates told him to go over behind where this position is. Now he goes on to say, to the right of us, looking at Little Round Top across a small ravine and a rocky ledge running perpendicular to Little Round Top, between us were rebel sharpshooters. One of them was 50 yards from us and saw we were about to be recaptured and commenced firing at us. I was sitting where Mama is standing. So he's telling you, writing on the back of this photograph, that he was actually right here where his wife is standing in that image. So he's actually right in the middle of this rock, right here, on July 2nd. And then he tells you the people that are around him. On my right was Cook, next to him was Smith, and on the extreme right, Price. Elder's head was resting on my lap, and he was lying on his back. Petrie in the same position with his head on Smith's lap. The first shot fired struck Cook in the forehead, killing him instantly. The next shot struck Price in the neck, inflicting a severe wound, and the third struck me in the left wrist. While I was supporting Elder's head, he was drinking at the time from a canteen. And an instant after I was hit, we were recaptured, and the rebel sharpshooters ran back over the rocky ledge toward Little Round Top, or toward Devil's Den, excuse me. So who's recapturing him? The Pennsylvania Reserves. Pennsylvania Reserves are charging down in the valley, and he gets recaptured. So how long is he down here in this precarious position? Probably about half an hour, probably about 30 minutes. And he's under Union control at one time, and he's under Confederate control at one time. And we know the people that were behind here. Lieutenant Elder has his leg amputated, goes to a hospital, dies July 25th, 1863. He's a native of Lansing, Michigan. He's buried in Lansing, Michigan today. Levi Price, the man that's over here on the end, is an ordnance sergeant from California. He's buried in California. He survived the American Civil War. So we know the people that are here, except Private Smith and Cook, because there are many of them. I think we may know who Cook is, but I tried to look at all the Smiths. And boy, there are way too many for us to figure out who they actually might be. He actually said that this photograph was taken at 4 p.m. on July 2nd, 1886. And it is a William Tipton photograph taken to the exact anniversary of time that he was down here. Now, whether he went into town and told William Tipton, I want you to come out and take my picture, or William Tipton had a small stand. This is 1884, so he doesn't have his big thing down in Devil's Den yet. He's got a small stand around Little Round Top, where he actually has this at. So it is possible that William Tipton was out in this area and took this photograph that was here. But George actually writes on it, and you can see he's got a medal on. You blow that up. That is the medal for the Military Order of the Loyal Legion of the United States. That is an officers' organization from the Civil War. You have to be an officer to belong to that at the time of the Civil War. So he later gets commissioned, and through this commission, he will join Motts. Now, what happens to him? He is wounded. He's taken to the 5th Army Corps Hospital. He's at the 5th Army Corps Hospital, and then he is sent to York, Pennsylvania. And he is in York, Pennsylvania from July all the way to February of 1864. This wound in his left wrist breaks bones, and according to one source, it appears that he may not even have the use of his left hand or arm from this action. And it's interesting, he still is able to be commissioned in the Army, still able to be in the Army. Later on in his career, it's noted in his pension records that he's unfit for military service at a certain rank. They also give him jobs that are more administrative in a lot of places that he served afterwards. So it appears that this wound, very detrimental and very lifelong lasting for him. Now, he's over in York until 1864, when he is commissioned as a lieutenant in the 3rd United States Infantry Regiment. He's going to go out of the 11th, the one that was at Gettysburg, go into the 3rd, and he will spend almost his whole career in the 3rd United States Infantry Regiment, up to the day he retires, which is 1898. Remember now, he joins service in 1861, and he actually becomes an Indian agent as well. So he's in government service, and retires with the rank of lieutenant colonel. And they advance him on the retirement list to give him extra pay in 1904. So the date of his active service ends about 1898 when he joined the military, 1861. We'll talk a little bit more about that. He marries a girl from York, Pennsylvania. That's the woman standing right here. Augusta Catherine Wantz, W-A-N-T-Z is her name. And this is her, and what's interesting about this is I don't know if he met her because his family had connections to York, because his father had blacksmithing connections there. It looks like his father possibly was a native of there. Or did he meet her while he's in the hospital over at York? And somebody introduces him. I don't know. They get married in 1868. They have 2 children. A girl named Florence, who's born in 1869, and a son named George, who's born in 1870. And these children are born Florence, the daughter is born in York, the son is born in Kansas, while the father's out in military operations at the time. Here's a photograph of him in later years. He's wearing 3 medals in this photograph. This is the Grand Army of the Republic medal. This is the Veterans of the 5th Union Army Corps medal, and that's the Military Order of the Loyal Legion of the United States, the officer's medal that he was wearing on the civilian image that he had. Now, meanwhile, where's his dad? And his dad actually gets remarried. He has a stepmother in 1862, along with other members of his family. His family is large. He's got brothers and sisters that moved from Gettysburg down to Richmond, Kentucky, and now he has half-brothers and half-sisters that are with him as well. So where is his father? At the time of the Battle of Gettysburg, his father is still down in Richmond, Kentucky, carrying on the carriage-making business. That's here. Meanwhile, let's look at 1870 and 1872. Because of the problems that George has with his family, I can't find times where he goes back to Kentucky while his father is living. I don't know whether he goes down and visits his family here in Kentucky. I can't give you any information on that. I know when he retired out of the service, the place he went to was Kentucky. And it looks like he went to Lexington, Kentucky, where his brother happens to be the chief of police detectives in Lexington, Kentucky. So that's the one we showed you just here at the beginning of this. His brother Henry, or Harry as they called him, was the chief of detectives for the Lexington police in Kentucky. During the Civil War, I don't know whether this man ever went back to Kentucky. Don't know that. Not sure about that. What's interesting is his father is married in 1862. Less than a year later, the same time that George is lying in the hospital in York, Pennsylvania, his father is in a suit with his stepmother for a divorce. His stepmother sues for a divorce. She wants her own property, which includes 1 slave, by the way. His stepmother was a slave owner. She owned a slave in the 1860 census. And according to the affidavit, it appears that Leonard broke the door down, kicked the door down, and then beat her, according to what the record said. They never got divorced. Apparently they reconciled. Well, hey, the story's not over. In 1870, the father is in Nashville, Tennessee. Here he is in a Nashville directory as a carriage maker in Nashville. But in 1871, he's in Lexington, Kentucky. So it doesn't look good. That's right. And it appears that they had been separated 2 other times between 1862 and 1863. No idea what happened between 1863 and 1871, but I do know in the fall of 1871 now, the 2 of them are back together. And this is a sad situation. It could be the reason why George, the subject of our talk today, a veteran of Gettysburg, decided to change his name. Could be, but I don't know. In 1872, Leonard Stout is in Richmond, Kentucky with his wife, Mary. And on February 1st, 1872, after they had an argument, he knifes her to death inside the house. He stabs her in the breast and abdomen 15 or 20 times. Jealousy of the husband is said to have been the origins of the difficulty. He was under the influence of liquor yesterday and were all alone at the time of the butchery, and some of the neighbors entered the house soon after and found Mrs. Stout on the floor in a pool of blood. She only lived long enough to tell the terrible story. So then they hauled Leonard Stout to the county jail. Now this is the county courthouse. The jail, this is where he's going to get tried. The jail is behind this piece of property at the time in 1872. It's not there today. Today is a parking lot. This is where the jail was, right there, right inside there. So while he's inside here, so he's in there. Now, according to the paper, I should say, not in Richmond, but in Lexington, the next day it says that a mob of 20, 30 people went to the jail where Stout is, drug him from his cell, and hanged him in a tree, is what it says right there. The mob quietly dispersed. I can't make this stuff up. But wait a minute. Here's another article that said, no, that's not true. He's still in jail. That Stout killed his wife is true, and he still remains in jail to answer the charge of murder. Nor have the people of Richmond attempted to interfere with due course. Now, what's really sad about this is about this time, on top of all of this, between December of 1871 and January 1872, George Stouch, the son of Leonard, is in Wheeling, West Virginia on recruiting duty. And according to the medical records, he has a case of smallpox. So it doesn't appear that he's anywhere near here. And then, while George Stouch is waiting in jail, he does commit suicide. He tries twice to commit suicide. One by hanging himself, and a second attempt after he ground down the metal part of his spectacles to cut one of his arteries. But according to this, he hanged himself with 2 handkerchiefs and a towel tied together from the top bar of the iron door leading into the dungeon himself. And down at the bottom it says he left letters saying that the woman who he had killed and had done him irreparable wrong and deserved the fate she had suffered at his hands. First thing I asked when I got to Richmond, where are the letters? I got to get that. I'm telling a researcher, where are they? He took his own life, he said, because he dreaded the disgrace of his children by the suffering of the public execution. He didn't want his children to suffer, so he killed himself on March 18, 1872. This is his grave in the cemetery at Richmond, and this is his first wife, Rachel, the one that died that I told you about, the strangulation. Now, when I went down there a year ago, this is an original picture that was sent to me. When I went down there a year ago, this is what it looked like. So now, unfortunately, these stones are all broken down. His second wife, the one that he murdered, is buried with her husband in this same cemetery. First husband. That's right here. This is her. Mary McCracken Stout. So unfortunately, for this family, it becomes really tough. Now meanwhile, George, that I know of, doesn't go back here until his retirement. He stays in the regular army despite all of this. You know, I mean, that's probably the reason why. Maybe he left. So if you want to do research on these regular Army soldiers, you've got to look up some things. Well, a lot of my friends that are here in the row, they're very interested in Indian War operations. George Stout is involved in the Indian War. In 1879, he's an officer in the 3rd United States Infantry Regiment. Where's he stationed? Fort Shaw, Montana. He's at Fort Shaw, Montana, which is in western Montana. 3rd U.S. Army Infantry Headquarters, District Headquarters, Department Command for Montana, right there. So I pulled the roll, one of them. I pulled one of the post returns. Okay, who was at Fort Shaw in 1879? Who were the officers at that post with George Stouch? Be very surprised to see who they are. Look who the first officer is on this list. The commanding officer, Department of Montana, is John Rutterbrooke, a veteran fighting where at Gettysburg? In the wheat field. Let's go down this list. John Henry Page of the 3rd United States Infantry Regiment, also in the wheat field at Gettysburg. William Mitchell of the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment at Fort Shaw, also in the wheat field at Gettysburg, and George Stouch of the 3rd Infantry, also in the wheat field at Gettysburg. 4 of those 17 officers listed on the post return were at Gettysburg. Not only were they at Gettysburg, they're in the same place at Gettysburg. So what are they talking about when they're sitting around the table? That's what I want to know. And I didn't go through here and look at each one of these. I mean, if we'd have gone through here and looked at every one of these names, these are just names I picked out that I knew right off the top of my head. If we looked at that, I think you would be more likely to find a tremendous amount of people that you all knew. Terrible tragedy in this family. I can't tell you. Two of these children dying in 1851 and 1852. That'd be brother and sister to George. A mother that dies of strangulation. I don't know whether it was by accident or on purpose. A stepmother that is knifed to death. George's sister-in-law is poisoned. His brother commits suicide by shooting himself in the head. I can't tell you the problems this family had. I'm just giving you some of them right here. And I don't know why, how, if it's a mental condition, if it's other different types of problems, but this man had a lot of tragedy in his life. He retires from the military service in 1898. He's advanced to the rank of lieutenant colonel in 1904, and he dies November 11th, 1906, and he is buried in Arlington National Cemetery. And he is buried right near Nelson Miles, Dan Sickles. Jim and I have been over to the gravesite where it is. Here it is, right here. His wife dies in 1912, and right behind him is his son-in-law. His daughter married a man named John McRae. John McRae died in 1940. He was an officer in the First World War, and guess what? He was a major general. Wayne Motts' cardinal rules: always marry up. Everybody should tell that many times here. So Stout pawns his daughter off on a man that becomes a major general in the United States Army. And he's buried right back here. His son becomes a hospital steward in the Spanish-American War. And the great-grandson tells me that there are 3 generations of their family that served in the United States military. He actually sent me some images, which I haven't included here. The pallbearers for George Stouch. Brigadier General Andrew Burt, Brigadier General John O'Connell. He's got 2 generals that are called the pallbearers. Colonel Henry P. McLean, 1885 graduate of West Point. And guess what? From what I could find, the great-granduncle of John Sidney McCain. You know how John McCain had his father and grandfather were both naval officers? This is the uncle to his grandfather. And so it'd be a great-granduncle of John McCain. Is a pallbearer for Henry Stout at his funeral. He has a rank of colonel. Colonel James T. Kerr of the General Staff, an 1881 graduate of West Point. Major Henry Romine, Medal of Honor recipient in Montana at Bear Mountain, 1877. Jim, you probably know all about that action. One of the pallbearers at this funeral was a Medal of Honor recipient in the 5th Infantry Regiment from that particular battle. And then the last on the list of the 6 pallbearers, Lieutenant William U. Williams, U.S. Army retired. So even when Stout died, the people that carried him to the grave are pretty well known and pretty famous people that are here. So folks, what did Mark Twain say? I like a story so much I have to tell it myself. Well, that's what I just did. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be happy to take any questions you may have.